Hello, thanks for joining me today for an update concerning the Western Hemisphere's premier political military alliance, NATO. This 32-member political military alliance is committed to the principle that an attack against one of its members is considered an attack against all. This is the underlying principle of collective defense and is enshrined in Article 5 of the Washington Treaty. For the record, NATO has only invoked Article 5 once, and that was in response to the 9/11 terrorist attacks in the U.S. It's pretty much common knowledge that the U.S. has historically been the strongest member nation of NATO, but with Canada, the two nations together build a transatlantic link that extends NATO beyond the borders of Europe and steers policy and defense concepts focused on the larger Euro-Atlantic area. In 2022, a strategic concept was adopted and published that laid out the alliance's core tasks and principles. The core tasks are deterrence and defense, crisis prevention and management, and cooperative security. The deterrence and defense of the Euro-Atlantic area, or DDA, is more focused on addressing threats from Russia through deterrence by conducting multi-domain operations, that is, dominating air, land, sea, space, and in cyberspace. The DDA methodology is different because it focuses on modernization of equipment and strategy in countering the complex threats of the 21st century. For context, NATO's dated Cold War mindset was previously focused on crisis response and containment, whereas the DDA methodology embraces bolder deterrence methods. This doesn't mean that NATO is warmongering, but rather practicing stronger methods to deter future conflicts and create off-ramps if escalatory pressure is applied. In 2024, there has been an increasing operations tempo as NATO executes its new force structure. The force structure and new systems employed are validated through a series of computer-assisted command post exercises. The exercises are meant to test and evaluate existing mechanisms for interaction between the staffs of NATO, its allies, and partners to improve collaboration and readiness at all levels of warfare and in all domains. Exercises in 2024 are testing the reforms at the headquarters and regional plan levels, while giving partner nations an opportunity to learn the structures and mechanisms driving decision-making, deployments, and operations. Now for a little Q&A, and for the controversial part of this discussion. Do you think that Trump's possible return to office may have incentivized NATO to reform and adopt a bolder deterrence posture? I don't know, but there certainly is a lot of historical context from his presidency that would certainly merit that discussion. That may be driving a deeper discussion about the security and defense of Europe in 2025 and beyond, especially as the U.S. presidential election draws closer. Over the years, Trump has been very critical of NATO and particularly concerned with each member nation's fiscal responsibility to invest 2% of their GDP to defense. In 2014, during Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea, NATO member states agreed to contribute 2% of their economic output to their militaries. The response was well received, but not executed. In fact, 3 years after the agreement, in 2017, during Trump's presidency, only 4 partner nations had met the requirement. By contrast, in 2024, that figure has now risen to 23 of 32, making 2024 a year of action for NATO. This may all be circumstantial, but it does indirectly represent that NATO and the nation states do seem to be committed to building an alliance that doesn't depend on the big American umbrella if Trump returns to the presidency. Even so, the invasion of Ukraine in 2022 has drastically changed the threat dynamic as the fear of a nuclear strike has returned to Europe. Russia possesses some 6,000 nuclear warheads, which is nearly half of the global stockpile. It's not only Putin that Europe fears, but Medvedev, the head of the Russian Security Council. He has threatened NATO and Europe, and he has this year deployed tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus, which has been an alarming escalation for 2024. However, Russian analysts do not predict that Russia will broadly invade Europe or directly engage NATO, but there are indications and warnings that a partial incursion into Estonia could be attempted. Nevertheless, the nuclear threat is real, and for now, NATO and the EU are looking to France for the nuclear deterrence capability in 2025 and beyond. France is the only other nation in Europe that has nuclear warheads. They have about 300. What NATO is also very concerned with is losing the U.S. nuclear triad structure. The U.S. triad is the largest, so let's take a look at U.S. triad delivery systems. Okay, let's get back to NATO's force model for 2024 and talk about some of the new force structures and then touch on command and control as well. The Alliance's force structure has been reinvigorated to better respond to specific threats, namely the threat from Russia. As discussed, the Deterrence and Defence of the Euro-Atlantic Area, or DDA, is the foundation to a series of plans. These plans are regionally based and specific to the dynamics of each region. This generates a unified force structure requirement, or FSR, that better serves the unified purpose of the DDA. The FSR outlines specific units, equipment, and capabilities that are required by region to fulfill the deterrence and defense of that region while also contributing to the overall NATO presence. The FSR is critical to get right and get right early, as all member nations will retain forces for their national defense and national priorities. They aren't all going to be towed. Under this model, readiness is more important than ever, and NATO has addressed this through the implementation of a tiered system of readiness. The tiers will be applied across the three subregions of Europe: the Arctic, the North Atlantic, and Southern Europe. Tier 1 includes an initial fighting force of roughly 100,000 troops that are to be ready within 10 days of notification. Tier 2 forces double to 200,000 troops that are to be ready within 10 to 30 days. These troops are more of a robust multi-domain force in terms of capabilities. Tier 3 forces bring core-level assets to the fight and number up to 500,000. Tier 3 forces are to be ready within 30 to 180 days. In addition to these forces, in 2024, NATO is activating the Allied Reaction Force, or ARF. This is a quick reaction force that differs from the previous Very High Readiness Joint Task Force, or VJTF, because the ARF is lighter, quicker, and consists of multi-domain capabilities, whereas the VJTF was solely based in land, air, and maritime formations. The ARF's cyber and space elements will be drawn directly from allied nations that have these capabilities and augments. The Allied Reaction Force sourcing is completed 2 years in advance of readiness windows in order to allow for allies to prepare their forces and to be certified by NATO authorities. Each ARF activation window runs from July of Year 1 through June of Year 2. NATO now has 3 Joint Force Command Headquarters, or JFCs. They have one in Brunsum, Netherlands, the second for Southeast Europe located in Naples, Italy, and the newest JFC is in the U.S. in Norfolk, Virginia, which was activated in 2021. JFC Brunsum has the most significant span of control, arguably, of the 3, as this JFC is responsible for Poland and the Baltic states. The Supreme Allied Commander Europe, or SACEUR, is one of 2 strategic commanders and is the head of Allied Command Operations. He actually reports to the Military Committee, or MC, and has to check with the MC before conducting any NATO military operations. This billet is usually an American billet that is dual-hatted as the commander of the European Command. Under recent alert system modifications in the new force model, SACEUR will have increased authority to enable operations in activating the Allied force structure sooner in the event of hostilities or aggressions directed at the Euro-Atlantic. Traditionally, SACEUR would have to follow a time-consuming process to receive full authority from the North Atlantic Council, or NAC. And he still does, but in the post-February 2022 landscape here in Europe, it's clear that activation processes must be expedited in certain circumstances for the ARF and possibly even for Tier 1 forces. I think I'm going to stop here. I'm at about that 10-minute mark. I like to keep these at 10 minutes or under. There's certainly a lot more to talk about, as I've barely scratched the surface. I know that's hard to believe, but there's just so much to unpack with this new NATO force model in 2024, the modernizations and all of the new systems in place. I look forward to re-engaging for the second segment, and I'd like to thank you for watching. If you like this channel, please subscribe. Thanks again. See you next time.